This is a show that triggers people because you've entered a free think zone. If you're not willing to be exposed to other points of view, tune out now and don't read the comments. You have been warned. Dr. Lisa Calderon, I need you to kind of tee this up because this is about City Park. And Venetia, how long have you? Venetia, you're a native, aren't you?
Yes.
See, this is the whole kind of, we can all go back and talk about our reminiscence about these parks, etc. But Dr. Lisa Calderon, I think that City Park, I remember when they put them gates up so the cars couldn't go in. I understand that they don't want the cars in at all. Can you just tee us up and tell me how we got to where we're at, and then we'll have a conversation?
Well, I'll let Scott talk about that process. I can tell you about why I got involved and why I was vocal about it. I'm Councilwoman Sedabaca's chief of staff, but I'm also her appointee to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. And I actually wasn't planning on saying anything about the parks issue because the decision had been made to reopen the park as you know, a part of the COVID plan on the other side of as we're getting toward the other side of it. But what compelled me to speak out was actually the public comment that was occurring that night. And it was mostly, if not all, white folks who were advocating for City Park to be closed permanently to cars. Now there's basically two kind of camps. One camp says, well, we're not advocating totally to shut it down. We just want a section. But there's another camp, and this is evidenced by a lot of the emails that we got through our office in District 9, who do want it to be car-free permanently. And so as I was listening to the testimony, what I realized was that, one, yes, it did not include people of color, largely. Also, there was a misuse of the word equity. People were using equity, throwing it around and not understanding the meaning of it. Equity does not mean sameness. Equity does not mean equal. Equity means that you have a specific remedy for a specific situation. So we don't give everyone the exact same thing because they may not need the exact same thing. Some people already have it. Some people need more of it. And so what I was hearing is that, well, we want City Park to be just the same as Cheeseman Park. We want it to be just the same as Wash Park. And that's not equity, right? We know that those two parks have a very white, affluent, kind of base neighborhood around it. That's fine of how that park is, but that's what makes, I think, Denver really stand out, is that we can take different approaches depending on the needs of the community. The other thing is City Park, a lot of us have great memories of City Park, and I know we'll get to that part in the conversation. I'm encouraging people in the chat to put in your favorite memories of City Park. But in listening to the testimony, a lot of that got erased. People weren't talking about what City Park meant to them. They were talking about, this is equitable for me to be able to ride my bike through. Now, I think you know, Brother Jeff, and other folks who can look at my Facebook page know that I'm a cyclist as well. I love our park system. I try to encourage people by posting pictures on my page of open space and getting out to parks and riding bikes. So I think that this was a good idea that went very wrong. And the good idea was, we want to have safety for everybody. But by having safety for everyone, that doesn't mean exclusion of other people. And so then hearing that, you know, the part of the park that got open was around access to the Martin Luther King statue, that concern around our Black elders who fought for integration, including of our parks, not being able to easily make that accessible for them, people with mobility issues, and also just, you know, traditions in our family are still relevant. Like, we're still here. So, you know, being able to pack up your car with your kids and your extended family and your barbecue and your picnic tables, that's not going to go behind you on a bike. And so we're creating. So all of that to say is that what I saw, and especially the reaction that we're getting in this conversation on social media, is this seems to be another one of those tipping points, just like the ink coffee controversy around, happily gentrifying the neighborhood. I think since 2011 or something was their sign. I can't remember the date, but it's a similar tipping point where people are saying, wait a minute, enough. We live here. We're still here. We have a long history here. You're not considering our needs. It feels wrong. And while I don't believe that the shared streets people are meaning it in that way, the effect is the same in that it embraces a group of people, a group of voices. You can't continue to try to convince me by having surveys that go out that agree with you. That's quantitative information. I'm talking about qualitative information or research when you're actually having focus groups, you're talking to the people most impacted. I didn't hear that in that Parks and Rec hearing. So that's what got me fired up. I spoke up, as did I think most of the Black folks on PRAB, and said, wait a minute, things are getting missed here. Let's reopen the conversation. So that's my framing. Scott would know more about the procedures and the process because that's all him.
Well, I'll get to Scott in just a second because I always use Scott as the cleanup guy because a lot of stuff gets said there's always some stuff, and I listen to everything and I'm like, all right, Scott, just kind of tell me what's going on. But I want to go real quick to Venetia and Rosalind, but Venetia first because I just happened to be looking at LJ's Facebook Live, and whenever I see Rosalind, I was like, uh-oh. I said, and then I saw LJ, I said, uh-oh. Then I saw Venetia, and I said, uh-oh, what is going on here? And I thought y'all was just there to get some ice cream or something. I don't know. But Venetia, can you tell me what is going on from your perspective? Why were you all out there on Saturday? And is Brother Jeff going to have to pack up everything on a bike and drag it into the park? Notwithstanding, I don't even have a bike, but I will get one if I need to have one to use the park. What's going on, Venetia? Please bring your brother up to date.
Brother Jeff, it was LJ's fault because she was scrolling through Twitter in the middle of the night and found out that the parks were going to be closed off, and she was frantic. So she sent me a screenshot of the map that they were showing. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then she was like, I can't go to the park. I'm on a cane for the rest of my life. I won't be able to go to the park. So I was like, hold on, let me do some investigation. And I went in and I looked up some stuff, and it was like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't seem right. And when the hell did this happen? Because I didn't know about it. So I called my mom and I asked her, I said, did you get a survey about the closures at City Park? And she was like, no, when was it supposed to have gone out? And then I was like, I have no idea. But so we found out they were having a bike rally on that Saturday, and we decided to go and see what was going on.
Okay, Roz.
And actually, it was Scott's fault why I was on the news because I wrote a lovely letter to Scott, and I didn't expect Scott to answer the letter.
No, Scott's going to answer. That's what
Scott
he does.
called me on the phone, Brother Jeff. Like in 10 minutes of him getting the letter, he called me on the phone, and we had
from Alabama.
In Alabama, and we had a very nice conversation. And I was like, you just can't close off the park. I mean, this is everybody's park. And so he was like, well, I talked to Channel 7, and I'm going to give her your information. And if they want to interview you, I say you do it. And I was like,
I'll go to Scott in a second. But Roz, I don't know if you was hot as fish grease or not, but you was out there like, okay, like I don't know how many battles I could fight at one time. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on, but you was out there like with the history and everything. Roz, what's happening with your park?
It was, I thought it was great that the young people on the other side of this issue were just so very well organized. And the young lady, she told me she was 29 years old, bless her little heart, was trying to explain to us how it was just about the safety issue. Well, I've been going to City Park for like decades. I'm waiting to see somebody produce some I got run over in the park data, stats, footage, something. I've never seen it. And I appreciate that they had the young man who was supplying the ice cream, young black man over on Colfax. Please go see him. He's wonderful. And anyone that knows me knows I love ice cream, but you're not going to buy me off with butter brickle. So
She
they
refused,
were,
Brother Jeff. She refused.
I absolutely did. And I went and saw him later because I still want to support him another day. But it seems like their thing is that I cannot colonize. I'll swear to everyone involved that I'm trying to liberalize. And it's not true. They don't understand that the park does not belong to them. That's entitlement that we've seen over and over again. And this is just another chapter in the I Am Entitled book.
Well, I could tell you this. I remember that park was a car park on Sunday. You couldn't get
Yes.
around that park, like, and no one got hit. But I remember when you can go through that whole park. If you went in that front entrance, you probably wasn't getting out for another 3 hours. I mean, it was
Right.
that many cars. It was a place where community used that particular facility, and you drove around the park to get to the grass. Like, you drove to your spot so you can take your picnic, or what I wouldn't say picnic, but your stuff to wherever, or you could drive to the playground and then drop the kids off. And then they had the little barbecue stuff. And if you got there early, you got one of the city sponsored kind of grills, or you could bring your own. I don't know what parks are all about right now. I don't know what, I mean, I get the bike lanes. I'm still trying to figure out the pylons down the middle of the street. I was going down 26th Avenue and I saw a sign that said Central Park, but it was 26th and Forest, and it had a lane number. And then on the other side, it was a different lane number, and they got these poles up to tell me what lane I'm in. Scott, what are you doing with our parks?
That wasn't in the park.
I know that. I mean, but I don't. I mean,
just telling you
is
that
it just
now.
is the park now just a bike
No.
lane? I don't know what it is. What's
no,
happening?
Just let me tell you, as all of you guys have your memories, I have my memories. I grew up in Park Hill. You know, I grew up on 26th and Niagara. City Park was the park I went to. I remember driving around the lake just like you do, being able to go anywhere in the park. You know, some of those closures happened prior to me coming and taking this job about 10 years ago. At this time, what we did, and the reason this kind of moved toward this park, you know, car-free park discussion, was one of the things that we were really trying to do during COVID, the height of COVID, was to just make people stay home. We didn't want people coming out to the parks and engaging, playing football and basketball, soccer, all those things. Stay home, be safe. So we really shut down a lot of the major regional parks totally to cars. And we really encourage people, if you want to go to a park, go to a park in your neighborhood. Maybe you'll discover a smaller park that you can walk to or roll to, and maybe you can enjoy that and actually discover a new park that's close to your home. As we've started coming out of COVID, people are starting to get vaccinated, and you know, we're all pushing that. We are starting to open the parks back up. I will take full responsibility. I'll tell you that right now, Brother Jeff, that we put out we did a survey. We knew that we did not get enough people of color in that survey. Clearly, we knew that. So we sent out the survey a little bit more to some different council offices and tried to encourage a little more input. But as we moved forward, we decided to make some recommendations and move them forward. On City Park, the recommendation that they moved forward, I should have looked at it a little bit closer, because the recommendation, and I like I said, you know me, Brother Jeff, if I make a mistake, I'm going to own it. It had 17th closed off. And it actually was encouraging. We actually were proposing to bring in all the traffic off of 23rd on that one little road by the greenhouse. As we started getting close to the time that we were going to implement this more like permanent closure, I realized that wasn't going to work. Trying to turn that little road over by the greenhouse into a 2-lane road, bringing traffic in, taking traffic out, and then having people walk on that road too was not going to work. It was going to be a life safety issue. Plus, how was I going to get to the MLK statue? You know, I grew up in this city. This park is, I am a wildlife biologist. I'm Black and Japanese. In the history of the agency that runs wildlife in this state, I was only the second Black biologist ever hired in that agency. And so the reason I became a biologist, though, is because I used to be able to drive to Duck Lake, right by the pavilion, park there, and watch the birds. That is one of the main reasons I became a biologist. That's my memory of City Park. So when you think about that, this park and me being able to drive from Montbello to City Park and take pictures of wildlife in the park actually allowed me to do the job I'm doing today. So that's one of those stories where, you know, people from our communities need to be able to drive to the park. I heard stories from people saying, well, New York, pull up a map of New York Central Park. See how many buses go to that park. See how many subway stops are in that park. See how mass transit serves that park. New York was built on the concept of mass transit. Denver was built on the concept of getting in your car and driving. I live in Montbello. I live 30 minutes from City Park on a good day. So to tell me I need to get on a bus or ride a bike to City Park to enjoy it just doesn't make sense. So as we moved forward, I realized that we could not close off 17th. And that's what I actually did. I owned it. I said, we're not closing it off. We're changing the map. I apologize, PRAB, Parks and Rec Advisory Board. We gave you a wrong map. I'm going to fix it. And that's where we're moving forward. Just so you know the numbers, Brother Jeff, before we actually implemented closures for COVID, 25% of the park roads were already closed. You know, all the roads on the south side of the lake are closed. If you want to go teach your child how to ride a bike, go on the south side of the lake. You don't need to do it right next to the MLK statue. Go on the south side of the lake. We've also added some additional closures, which is the road on the southwest part of the park nearest York. It's just like a little loop road. We're closing that. You can take your child there and use that road to teach them how to ride a bike. The other piece that we are closing in the park is the little section between the pavilion and the playground, the road by Duck Lake. The reason we're closing that, and this is personal to me too, is because parents and others use that road as a cut through of the park. You get off of Colorado Boulevard, you get onto 23rd, you shoot through, you go through the park, and then you pop out on York Street. That's what people were doing, and that's what they've always done. You know you've done it, Brother Jeff. So
all the time.
So we closed that road.
I know how to get through that park. And I know how to get through that park.
You cannot go through the park. It's not just going to be a cut through. Now we're trying to make the park more of a destination instead of a park where you just drive through it so you don't have to deal with the traffic on 23rd or 26th or 17th.
Okay, Venetia, I got to ask you, and Calvin, welcome. It's good to see you. Community jewel and historian. There's so much that I want to talk a little bit about, but Venetia, you all, let me check what I'm hearing. I heard that because of COVID, parks were closed as a way to not bring folks into the park. That makes all kind of sense to me because folks were running in them parks, and they were just like, even when the announcements were first made that said, look, stay home, there's a curfew, there's all kind of different things. And then you look in the park and folks are like, well, dang, they playing football and basketball, like they're using it as a way to, release and putting everybody at risk, in my opinion. I believed all of that. And so from what I understood is that there have been times when the parks have been closed and they've been open. You know, sometimes you can get through. Sometimes they're open. If you're doing the Black Arts Festival, you can call Scott. Scott's going to give you a key to the lock. You're going to open up. You're going to bring in the vendors, all of those different things, all of that. But now in the conversation, I'm also hearing, and somebody wants it permanently closed, like permanently, City Park. And Venetia, the two don't jive with me. Is it COVID? And then COVID was such a good thing that no one's in the park and someone was having such a great time with their kids in the park, didn't see a car. Now let's just leave it. Like, what are you hearing, Venetia?
Same thing, Brother Jeff. It was like during COVID, it was closed, but when you would drive by there, only people in the park was white people. Only people. My mom lives right by City Park, and we would drive by there, and they'd be in the park deep, like super deep. And I think they got a taste of what it was like to have it all to themselves and not have all the rest of the people in the park. So they were like, yeah, let's just leave it like this. And I didn't like that. It just like, you can't get to the Martin Luther King statue. You know that. How you gonna cut off the Martin Luther King statue to people who visited a lot?
Wow. Well, Calvin, what are you hearing? What's your memory of the park? And Calvin, have you been following this any? I know you're getting your station set up, but what brings you into this conversation around City Park, and how important is that to our community and the city as a park? I don't know if Calvin can hear me. Can you hear me, Calvin? He's blinking, but I don't know if Calvin can hear me. But with that being said, everybody, is this a city park or is it a personal backyard? Is it a personal background for somebody who just purchased a nice piece of real estate and actually has a huge park adjacent to them and kind of control it? What are your thoughts about what's happening in this city?
Brother Jeff, go ahead, Rosalind.
The thing you had mentioned about special events and the Black Arts Festival, City Park Jazz Festival, we talked about that day also. Actually, it was very interesting. Out of the, and I keep saying this number, 206 people there were 6 black women, and the rest were Caucasian, mainly female, between 30 and 45. I asked about the Black Arts Festival, having the fact that I'm on the Black Arts Festival committee. I let her know, you're standing right on the site of the Black Arts Festival. And she said, well, we can always decide about special events. It struck me odd that she said we. And I had to inform her, I'm a special event, so are you saying I could come in when I like? But it's just like Venetia was saying, it's just when you get accustomed to something that works for only you, and you fail to see outside your situation about how that affects anyone else, it becomes this problem that we have right now. It's about me and only me, and it's such a self-centered way of thinking, but it goes back to what we've experienced pretty much all our life.
Well, I could tell you, Calvin, when you're able to hear us, let us know because we want to bring you into the conversation. Let me just give you guys some context from what I remember. The reason that park got blocked off, and it may have been ahead of every other park, but black folks used to be in that park deep. Black and brown folks were in that park deep. And at one point, one summer, someone shot a gun and the bullet went up and over into the zoo and it hit a little white kid. And that's when all of a sudden it became known as the Summer of Violence. Summer of Violence was not based on black folks killing each other. That had already been happening. If you study the research, the numbers were going down at that particular point. The Summer of Violence actually meant a white kid got hit by a bullet in that zoo. And what took place was they closed that park down. That park down, and they called a special session, Roy Romer, and they brought those legislators together, and that's when they started that youth offender system and started charging young people and putting them in adult prisons. They took it out of the hands of the juvenile system, and Dr. Lisa Calderon knows all about this stuff. This is like her wheelhouse. And they started giving the children to the adult systems to deal with. That park, City Park, got closed down not because people were getting hit by cars. That park got closed down because a white kid got hit by a bullet. And from that day to this day, that park has been a pedestrian park except for special events. Dr. Lisa Calderon, am I making any sense, or am I just making that up?
You're making a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think what people who are proponents of changing the park to making car-free don't recognize that not only the history, but it's also its political history as well. It's cultural history and its political history. That park has been, a source of great joy, but also a source of concerns. It's almost like where you see the intersection of the issues that impact our city coming into play there. You're absolutely right. The summer of violence was no more violent than any other summer. But because the gang violence started impacting white folks, because as you point out, it had been impacting Black folks, Latino folks for a long time. But when it started impacting white folks, then that was lockdown of things, including of the park. And so I think what those of us who've lived through that experience know that when we see another lockdown, then that is a signal that we need to pay attention to. That these are the intersections of race, class, and age and ability all coming together, and politics around the use of this park. Who gets to use it? Who has the right to it? I think Venetia said it well. Is that it's become, during COVID, it became a park for those who were closest to it, who could use it. Well, if you were, if you don't live in that immediate area, you've been displaced from that area. For many of us who grew up in Denver and grew up with that park as part of our adolescence and our family outings, coming back to that park in some ways is coming home. And so when you, through politics, and whether cars should be in or not is a political issue as well, start to exclude people, and that's the nature of inclusion and exclusion, right? Is that as soon as you say no to something and yes to other things, you are excluding other folks. So this isn't a harmless request. Maybe it was made naively without thinking of all of those other ramifications. But I have to tell you, I'm in many of these conversations around more safety for bicyclists. Again, I support that. I don't want to see anybody be killed on a bike. I don't want to see anybody killed using our streets. But we also have to be really precise with the remedy and not go overboard, because there's unintended consequences. And this was one of them. And I'm glad that Venetia and Rosalind spoke up, and LJ on her video as well. So I would encourage folks to, I'm glad that you all have engaged us in this conversation.
Well, I could tell you, Scott, again, I want to circle back for just a moment, because you always seem to be in the forefront of these fights when it comes to the community stuff. Like, it doesn't surprise me that you called back immediately from Alabama, because no matter what's happening, you are accessible and you just call it as it is or whatever. I'll never forget, Lumumba Sayers was training folks from the community in City Park, run in the park, stop, and then they'd exercise and they run, and then all of a sudden the person said, no, you can't do this. And it was like, you mean you can't go in the park and run the park and exercise and keep moving? No, you can't do that. And he's using the park as a source to heal community. We had to pull in Scott to say, you got to quit picking on the community that uses these spaces for a particular reason. And Scott has to interpret all of this testing back and forth for people who just don't kind of get it. Is the park system, like the rest of the city, becoming racialized? Like, why does the park have to be closed down? Because there's no history of people getting hit. You've got bike lanes. Do they want another bike lane? Like, do they just want it to be a bike park? And you also have events where they have major cyclists that race around the park. Like, the park is used for a lot of different reasons.
Yes.
Why does it have to be, or will it be, shut down permanently
No.
and used as a
Just telling
particular
you that now.
reason
No,
with
it will
special
not be,
events?
okay. We are, like I said, we made a mistake on the closure of the Esplanade coming off of 17th. That is open and it will stay open. You know, it might be closed for special events, just like normal. But we did close a couple sections of additional park area, but it should not impact negatively the use of the community I live in negatively. That road can still be used. I know the Black Arts Festival uses that road in the southwest part of the park. That will be open for that use of that event or any other event. So these roads that are being closed, some of them that are being closed, can still be utilized. But the main roads in City Park are going to be open. I think some people have a misconception of what different regional parks in the city. You got to realize City Park, first of all, is our largest park in the city. It is our crown jewel for everybody. It's got a major zoo in it. It's got a major museum of nature and science. It's got a band pavilion. It's got a bandstand and a pavilion. It's got soccer fields. It's got a tennis area. It's got a regional playground. It's got another playground that will be redone shortly. This park is busting at the seams by people wanting to use it. We are not going to close it to people driving to the park because a special interest group wants us to close all the roads so they can walk into the park. That's not going to happen. And I've been honest with them. The reason we opened the park back up, one of the main reasons, that date that we utilized to open the park back up, was because that is the date that we started permitting the athletic builds and youth sports started back up in the park. I can't tell families that are getting ready to play soccer or football with their kids to park over at East High School or in the neighborhood and walk into the park. That makes no sense. So this park has a different use than some of the other parks. Its size makes it a lot different too. It's a very large park. And there's no parking on the perimeter of City Park. Tell me one spot where you can park on Colorado Boulevard, 17th, York Street, or 23rd and walk into the park. You can't. You got to park in the community. Wash Park, there's individuals out there that'll say, well, Wash Park, you're keeping some of the roads there closed. Look at Wash Park. You can park all the way around the perimeter of Wash Park. Plus, you have a major high school right across the street you can park at too. Cheeseman Park. Cheeseman Park, basically, we're keeping closed because think of Cheeseman. There is nothing in that park except for historic structures. There's one little playground that actually you can park really near and walk into the park and get to. But there's no athletics in Cheeseman Park. There's no pavilions. There is the one historic structure that we do permit out, but we can work on allowing people to access that. So each park, you can't compare apples and oranges. Each park, even though they're regional parks, are all utilized differently. So Wash Park, people are talking about, oh, well, you're keeping Wash Park closed. Well, we've got to open up the road at Wash Park, too, because the rec center, we've got to allow people to be able to get to the rec center and the boathouse. So there's going to have to be some times where that road will be opened up. I'm pretty sure it's opened up already. So we've already opened up some additional roads in some of our parks.
Well,
Another road that we closed was the road through Sloan's Lake. Sloan's Lake had a road that cut through it diagonally. That road was specifically being used as a cut through of the park to get from one side to the other. That is not what Park Road should be used for, so we did close that road, and that road's going to stay closed permanently. There are parking spaces all the way around that park, so you can access in parking lots. You can access the amenities in that park. So City Park is a different animal. It's got a lot of things going on, and we have to serve everybody. So this compromise that we came up with, everybody's a little mad at me. So for me, then I won the battle because everybody can be a little mad at me because that means everybody didn't get exactly what they wanted. But everybody kind of sees that there's a challenge and there's a balance to making sure that everybody can utilize the park.
Well, I could tell you there's a couple of questions in the chat, and don't forget, go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation of any amount. We appreciate everybody who does that, and don't forget about Chubby Curls, educating the natural community one scalp at a time. I'm wondering, ladies, if you're liking what you're hearing, because I like what I'm hearing, and it sounds like we've got the person on board that where the buck stops. Scott, does the buck stop with you, or does this have to go to another level? Is it going to the city council?
No,
And
it stops. It, as an appointee of the mayor, and I manage the Parks Department, and Happy Haynes is my boss. Don't you know Happy Haynes grew up in that park too? And I'll tell you, we've had some great discussions about the road closures in this park and the access that this plan provides. And Happy is 100% on board. This goes nowhere else. This is what we've done. We've made some compromises. We've made a few additional road closures in City Park. Right now, 35% of the roads in the park are closed to vehicles. Think about that. 1/3 of the roads in City Park are closed to cars driving in them. So that leaves plenty of space for people to go enjoy those roads. The other thing is there is 12 miles. Did you hear that? 12 miles of trails and sidewalks in that park. And I know somebody mentioned, well, some of them are in bad conditions. If you just take away half of those and say half of those are in bad condition, you still got 6 miles of trails and sidewalks in that park. If you take that half, there is lots of spaces in that park for people to enjoy safely on bikes and walking. So I think people need to realize that. But yes, this is what we're moving forward with, and that park needs to serve all community members. And that is a park that is very, very dear to the Black community. That Martin Luther King statue, if you ever go out there during the day and you sit there at that statue, the number of tour buses that stop at that statue from people from across the country that come and see that statue is phenomenal. And they're learning about our history and our culture and how our city is pretty special. And so why would I want to take that away from people to be able to access and enjoy our city in that manner?
Well, I could tell you, May has a question. Can someone explain this a little differently? If the roads are closed to all people and everyone has to walk in, how does this negatively impact one group more than another? Seems it's just negatively impacts everyone. What if you can't walk in? LJ says she can't walk in.
Let me answer that right now. My father-in-law is a quadriplegic. He can't walk. Right there, just the way she stated that shows that there's a lack of understanding that everybody can't walk. Everybody, what if you have to walk on a walker? What if you have a cane? Everybody it's not equal. It's not, that's what Dr. Calderon was talking about, equity. It's not equity when you can't walk. You need to be able to drive to the statue so you can get out and enjoy the statue.
Wow. Well, I can tell you, I go to, let's just talk Black Arts Festival. I walk to the Black Arts Festival all the way practically from Welton. It's packed, and that's good, but that's not every day. And even if you can't drive in the park for the Black Arts Festival, they will open that gate up and have a golf cart ready to drive you all through that park. So unless you're going, I mean, like, I don't know. How are you feeling, Rosalind? Are you feeling better about this conversation? Because you was hot as fish grease and wouldn't even eat the ice cream.
I think the difference is we've always been saying share, and share is good. We've always shared City Park. I've roller skated there. I've walked. I've biked. I've ridden in my car. Never had a problem. So we've always been saying share. What I'm hearing is get out. And so that for me is the problem. It's not a problem to invite all the bicyclists. We had that same issue that they say they're concerned about the day of their rally, because there were lots of cars, obviously lots of bikers, roller skaters, people towing their kids in them little mesh nets behind their bikes, which I think is the worst thing you could possibly do. But it was a shared experience. I'm all about the share. We're hearing get out.
Did you all ever go senior ditch day and then go up around that lake and then get those little paddle boats and get it to that middle island in the middle and pull that boat up to the island and jump out and hang out in the island?
Well, I rode the boat, but I wasn't getting out because there was bugs on that little island and critters and no thank you. But I feel good knowing that we have strong forces like Miss Venetia Hall, mover shaker, that we have Scott, that we have Lisa, that we have the ear of people who actually are able to see that it's not about just trying to say, this is our park, you can't have it, but just an equitable experience for everyone. Scott, I appreciate everything you just said. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, Scott's always there, and that's what representation looks like and feels like, because the park should be with everyone. Dr. Calderon, I know you're going to have to go in just a second. Listen to Venetia for just one moment, and then I want you to chime in. Venetia, I know you're the kind of research guru. Like, every time something comes up, you don't just show up to a rally with just the bullhorn, but you come with the data and the worksheets and the history. What did you find in terms of your research, and what is it that you would like to share with those who absolutely don't get what we're talking about? Because inevitably there are those who don't get what we're saying, and you know, we should honor their voices as well. What would you like them to know?
One of the things, Dr. Jeff, was that when they did the survey that they put out or whatever, they came back with this 4,200 plus number that people were resoundingly wanting the park to stay closed, but they didn't tell you that 4,200 was a combination of all the parks, for all the parks being, you know, the closure staying. And what they also didn't tell you is, like, the majority of people that answered the survey were white women 18 to 34. And they were the main people that really were for the closures. It was like 2.3% black and then the other. But mostly it was white women under the age of 45 that were really gung-ho for the closures. And they didn't think about people like my mom, who's 72 years old and doesn't walk as well as she used to. And they didn't think about people like Miss Roz or anybody that's in this neighborhood still. They didn't think about any of them.
Well, you know, Dr. Calderon, before you go, and Scott, I would like for you two to address this as policy folks that listen and see what happens nationally, et cetera. There's this conversation about the green footprint and all of that, and, you know, the cars and the emissions and ways to get cars off the roads. Is this just basically another way to say, you know, cars are the problem and we need to figure out what to do with them, and, you know, folks should do more around the mobility and biking and different modes of transportation? How does all of this play into these national or local conversations about mobility and traffic patterns and ways to get around as we get all of these people coming and all of this density? What is this transportation conversation about, and cars versus bikes and sharing the roads, et cetera?
Well, I mean, cars are harmful to the environment. So are marijuana grow houses. So are cows. I mean, we should all be concerned about our environment. But that's not what this is about, right? I think that's why I'm saying that this started off as a good intention, but was really tone deaf about who is most impacted by climate change, who are most vulnerable to impacts in air and water. It is exactly these same communities who want access to this park and don't live right next to it necessarily, right? The people in the GES neighborhoods, they also want access to the park. How are they supposed to get there? You know, when they don't even have basic infrastructure for sidewalks, much less bike lanes, and then they're cut off by the highway to get across safely to the park. So, you know, and I'm going to Venetia's point about the survey results. You know, in these meetings when people throw survey results, I'm just about the first to say, show me your data and show me your methodology. I want to know, I want a demographic breakdown of who you're talking about and who you talk to. And not just that, it's not just about throwing a wide net, getting as many people who agree with you. I also want the micro level or the qualitative analysis of having those conversations with people who would be disproportionately impacted by your change. There was a column, an op-ed in Westward, Keep City Park Car Free for Our Kids and an Equitable Future. This is what I'm talking about when people misuse the word equity. And I'm sure she's well-meaning, but it was written by a white woman. You go on the website, you see that it's white kids in the school, it's almost all white teachers, and yet she uses the word equity. Instead of saying, what will happen if we shut out all of those other communities from using this park, including immigrant communities? It doesn't matter what kind of immigrant community you're from. Immigrant communities tend to have more kids. Are you telling us that this is equitable for immigrant communities? Like, not everybody is single. Not everyone doesn't, can just ride a bike and not have kids and do a bike meetup together. I have a bike rack on the back of my car, but I don't live right near City Park. I live in Cole. I have 2 dogs, and my daughter goes. And we often go in the evening time after work, right? So I'm not going to park blocks away in a neighborhood where I, as a Black woman, don't already feel safe, and now have to walk in at night into a park to get to the lighted areas of the park, which is, around the boathouse, etc., which is, it's beautiful to walk at night. But there's no analysis there when people are just looking at cars because they're bad for the environment and they're bad for safety, right? That park serves many different purposes, as Scott said. And so we have to look at, if we're really going to look at an equitable lens, we need to look at this particular park, its particular history, its culture, and the varying needs and communities that it serves.
Scott, there's a comment that says that they're saying that repairing those trails, et cetera, in the park is going to be too much money, so it can't be done. And so would you address that? And then also, just growing up, in this city before it became the Mile High Income City, and it's been on that trajectory for a while, just as a kid, I was able to do so much with no money. Like, I could get on RTD for like a dime or something. I'd find some money in my pocket, get on the bus, go somewhere, go through the park, walk right up in that Museum of Nature and Science, throw a penny in that lion's mouth, rah, and walk in there and see all of the exhibits and the stuff behind the glass and look at the little arrowheads of the Native Americans and all that stuff. I don't even think our community is able to go in these places unless it's a free day. Are you seeing ageism also in terms of growth and development? Because don't seniors use the park? Don't older folks just like to go to the park, sit on the bench, look at the pond, do a little walk around? Like, this city seems to be focused more on younger, more upwardly mobile, someone that can deal with an app in their hand and perhaps get their bike or whatever. What about the seniors? I'm big on these seniors, Scott. How do they use these parks?
So you're correct. I think Pam Giner, the District 11 Parks and Rec Advisory Board member, said it so clearly on one of her comments. It was short and sweet. She said, I just want to be able to drive to the park and sit down underneath that tree. And if I can't drive to the park, I can't sit underneath that tree. It just made so much sense. And she's in her 70s. She actually runs a program called Montbello Walks. This is an African-American woman that has been able to raise money to get a 15-passenger van to take even seniors that are even older than her around to the parks in the city and make sure that they can enjoy this city. And so she said it clearly. So, for me, Brother Jeff, it's one thing that I have to really, it's a real challenge for me. I have to try to balance all these different, just on this talk, we've talked about so many different user groups and so many different people. And I have to try to hear it all, take it in, and make good decisions. And that's what I try to do. I can get all the data in the world. I can get all these surveys thrown at me and look at all that data. But guess what? When it comes down to the bottom line, that data is not going to make a decision. I have to make the decision, and I have to own that decision. And that's what we did with the city park information. we knew that we did not have enough African Americans participate in the survey. We just knew that. And so we have to take that into account and definitely hear some of those other emails that we're getting, some of the stories that are being told, just like the stories, like when I talked to Venetia, we talked about the park. I have to hear that stuff and be able to respond and make good decisions that actually address everybody's needs. Like I said, if everybody's just a little mad at me, that's how it is. On the repair of the trails, like I said, that's why I said there's 12 miles of trails. Even if you take half of them out, you still got 6 miles. I understand that some of those roads and some of those trails in the park are in bad condition. We have the historic red sandstone sidewalk that runs along 17th Street. That is in poor condition. That is not something that you want to try to wheel a wheelchair over or walk along if you're using a cane or a walker. You can't use that. So I understand that there are some trails and some things that we need to work on in that park, and we will do that as we move through. That's a very large park. It takes a lot of money to maintain it. But we also have 260 other parks that are in communities all across the city, and we do look at equity in those parks. And we are trying to make sure that we are improving parks in communities that have been left out for decades. So we are trying to improve parks in the Cole neighborhood, in GES, in Westwood, in Montbello. Those are communities that we're really striving to try to do some improvements and make those parks better. So communities of color that have been excluded for so long have something in their backyard that they can be proud of.
Well, Dr. Lisa Calderon, I want you to give your final words because I know you've got to go. And LJ says the organizers stated flat out on Twitter that the disabled don't drive anyway, and that seniors can rely on caregivers to wheel them in. Dr. Calderon, final words before you go off to your next meeting. And it's good to see you, hear you. And I was in a meeting with you earlier today. You're just brilliant. You and Candy, the whole crew. Thanks for all you do. But Dr. LC, what are your going away words?
I just really appreciate this forum to have this conversation. I thank Venetia, Roslyn, LJ, and others who really elevated this. Ms. Pam Jiner as well, who I sit on the PRAB board with, and thank you for your comments in the chat too. I think I want people to be really clear. We're not against safety. We're not against the environment. In fact, it's just the opposite, right? We want all of those things too, and it doesn't have to be at the exclusion of communities that have been displaced. And it needs to be made in partnership with those communities as well. I always think that when you look at the people who are most impacted, who really do suffer inequity, not just people who throw out the term lightly and use it for their own agenda, but people who are really impacted by inequitable systems in this increasingly unaffordable city, once you address their needs, that raises everybody up, right? Because everyone benefits when the most impacted people are benefiting as well. So I'm hoping that this is a catalyst for more conversation with those who, want to see less cars in parks. That's a conversation we will continue to have, but we also know that it can't be at the exclusion of other folks. And the final thing I just want to say is that Councilwoman Seda have put out a statement as well to say, we hear you, we hear this is a concern, and get to know the history of City Park because it is about opening to all people. It's one of the places where we all can go from, regardless of our background, our class, our mobility, where we should be able to have access. And so she's committed to making sure that remained the case.
We're going to make sure that Scott gets the final word. Rosalind, final words from you. And are you feeling a little bit better? We're going to get you into some of that ice cream.
I got the ice cream. It was great. I got it another day. But yeah, I feel better. I guess my goal here was to make sure that other people knew because it seemed like it was just trying to be pushed through very quickly and quietly. And so just kind of making sure that the community I know and I love was also involved in the process, that we were invited to the table and that this was something that we could all, like you're saying, feel good about at the end. So I'm feeling better.
All right. There we go. Venetia, what are your thoughts?
I'm really appreciative of Scott for calling me back, and letting me know this is not going to happen, and to Lisa for jumping in and putting her 2 cents in, and starting another dialogue that uproar. But I thank you for that. It's right. It was just me and Roz and LJ trying to defend ourselves against it, and it was like. Then Lisa got on and was like, "Yeah, you guys need to just calm down." I really appreciate those two and Miss Ross for coming out and just showing her support at the bike rally, because it was just 6 black women against 200 women, and it was just like nonsense.
Well, I could tell you, I thank you all for, getting out and making sure, because when I saw LJ's feed, I saw Rosalind, I saw, Venetia, I'm like, what's going on here? And Scott, I want you to kind of give the final words in terms of your vision for City Park, Black Arts Festival. Are the parks going to reopen now that folks are more vaccinated? Kind of give us our steps moving forward and what to expect from the park system. And like I always tell you, whoever maintains those grounds and puts those flower beds together and all that stuff in the medians and in those parks, I think they're the best that ever do it. But Scott, talk to me a little bit about what the future holds for City Park.
Just City Park, I just want to thank everybody. I've told this to Dr. Calderon, to Lisa many times. Me and her have lots of discussions and lots of texting going on when we're in meetings and stuff. We're always communicating. We might not always see eye to eye, and that's okay. But we respect each other and we have good discussion. And I just want to thank Rosalind and Venetia and everybody just for speaking up, because you know what, it makes my job a lot easier to be able to make these decisions when I have to go against some very enthusiastic people that I have both sides to back me up. And so I'm okay, accepting that, there's missteps that are made. We all make mistakes. But the way that you rise to the occasion is that you accept those, you make it right, and you move forward. And you know what? I just appreciate it. We're going to continue having the festivals in the park, the Black Arts Fest, the jazz concerts, just everything. The park is home to so many people. It is where I learned how to sled. I know there's lots of people that learned how to sled right outside the museum on that tiny little hill. It seemed so big when I was 6 years old. But now, this is part of our life. It's part of our culture. And you know what? I'm not going to take that away from anybody just so there's individuals that can ride their bikes in, and that be the only thing that's in the park. So I understand that personally. And so I just want to thank everybody for jumping in and knowing that, and having faith that we're going to make the right decisions. And if sometimes we don't, we have to own those, and we have to try to do the best to correct those. So, and everybody, I just want to say, Dr. Calderon got on Facebook the other night, and she texted me and said, "Hey, Scott, there's this thing going on." And so I don't ever really respond to anybody on Facebook, but I did that night. And what I did was I put my email on there. I put my work email on there and said, if you want to discuss this, email me and I'll have a discussion with you. I didn't get any emails back, just so you know. There was people that wanted to have that discussion on Facebook. I am not going to have a discussion about procedures or policies or what we're doing in the parks on Facebook. If you want to talk to me, everybody has my cell phone number, 720-837-0489. Everybody has it. Jeff, you can put it out there. Everybody has my email address. If you want to discuss an issue in a park in this city, all you got to do is reach out to me and I will reach back out.
and he will do it regardless of the circumstances or the situations. He's always there. Thank you all. Calvin Williamson, we missed you on this one, but Dr. LC, we got to get Calvin back in, because when we start talking about Denver history, I'm just loving everything, and particularly Northeast Denver history. I love everything he puts and posts and shares. I won't tell everybody all that I learned in City Park, but I learned quite a bit in City Park, including how to count.
Yeah, I think many of us have things that we're not going to publicize.
Some of us got our degree in City Park, and you're not going to deny us our alma mater. You're not going to do that. Thank you all so much. Again, thanks to everybody that goes to brotherjeff.com, makes donations of any amount. We appreciate everybody's comment. Bruce Gibson said he fired his caregiver, so he won't be getting pushed in the park. And for everybody who's talking about ageism, you're looking at ageism. You're looking at age on this show. This is us. So, I mean, we got it. All right. With that being said, thanks each and every one of you. I told you it was going to be